So we've got the possibility of that slipping off and falling down. And at some point, this thing has got to come off of that so we can work on this. So which cut do you make first? Well, we got an interesting one today. Got a great big old valley oak that just failed completely. It just completely disrupted. And there's a lot of decay on the inside of this old tree. And I find it really interesting when I look at a tree like this. You know, you see something like that, and it's pretty evident that this tree has been in rough shape for a long time. And then you look up and through here, and you can see all the brown rot. It's completely through the system of this tree. And there wasn't a whole lot holding this thing. This thing is kind of in a precarious position too. So we've got several tons of weight being held by a tiny little point right here on this trunk. So one of our initial key important jobs is to make sure this isn't going to come crunching down on top of us. A lot of times trees that implode and fall down have got hidden pressures that you're just not quite ready for. So all this weight, all of this is being held up right here. So very carefully coming up from the underside to relieve the pressure so this thing will bend over is pretty key. Getting it to drop down onto the ground. I'm going to try and get a lot of this brush out of the way before we make these moves. But well, just working around in here, this is a little scary. A lot can happen. All the weight from this big thing is pressing down on this, and all that out there. That's a big tree. All that out there is. Holy mackerel. Thankfully we don't have to haul the wood away. I just heard a crack. Maybe it's my imagination. I did relieve a little bit of the pressure on one side. Always got to be ready to jump. Hard to believe that this tree held up for as long as it did. And everywhere you look is rot. Another thing I'm really concerned about is this is quite the estate property, and on these old estate properties, especially up in the Los Altos, Menlo Park area, years ago there were companies that did a lot of concrete in cavities. So you can see the remains of an old wound right here, and God only knows how far that goes in. You know, actually that would be really interesting to cut that off and dissect it. You know, if they slice it all the way off from the front, that'll give you a better idea of just how far the decay ran from that old, it's almost a flush cut. But look at how dried out and how much rot and how much decay was in this tree. It's interesting that nobody recognized that this tree was a hazard until it fell down. Likely because it's at the back of the property and not really going to hit anything except for the landscape. It was just sort of ignored for a long time. One of these back 40 trees that, you know, it is what it is. I guess actually if this was on my property I would have just left it be until it fell apart too. But now untangling this mess is going to be a real bear. And we got a long haul. Thankfully we've got the brush cart. We got to shuttle the brush a couple hundred yards all the way down that way. Hundreds of times to get this stuff out of here. We're going to end up stacking all the wood down along by that fence there. So we clear this stuff out, clear the wood out, kind of work in a pattern here, and start getting all the brush out of there. Get everything else cleaned up, because the last thing I want to do is crush the brush and then be working around brush underneath it. There's our little brush cart here. And these 2x4s do a lot to make the pile big. And we tie it down with a rope. Well, from this perspective, I climbed up on top of this thing. I'm looking for evidence of concrete or cables or through rods or anything that might, you know, kill my chainsaws. Boy, there's so much decay in this tree. It's amazing. It's amazing that it survived as long as it did. Because all the brush on here was green. So if you look at that stump right there, from here you can see that only about a third of that trunk had any life in it. The rest of it was dried out and decayed all the way to the center. So a third of this trunk was supporting the entirety of the tree. And you could read it on this side as well. And up in through here. All the way up this piece that was rotted out. So I've got all that to deal with down there. Boy, this is going to be touch and go. I expected it to be much worse than this. You can see some discoloration here, but as old as that cut is, it must have been much more of an appropriate cut because it seems to encapsulate the wound fairly well, and there's a lot of active new tissue that's grown up and around the wound. I'm guessing that was probably 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago that this was cut. It takes a long time to develop that much callus tissue that grows up and over it. It's kind of interesting. You can almost read the rings here on the outside, but I don't think that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, 1, 2, 3, 20, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, because from here to here it gets really, really tight and hard to read. I'm guessing 25, 30 years ago that was cut. All this is up in the air, and it's all teetering. Nothing is holding. It's pinned to the ground in a few spots. But all this weight, as well as the piece underneath, are going to have to move somehow. And I've got to get them down on the ground without pinching the saw, without getting trapped underneath it or hurt or worse. And we're talking tons and tons of heavy, wet wood up here. I was pretty stressed out on this job, to be honest with you. And I didn't want Jorge to make the cuts. Not that I don't trust him, but when you get into a situation like this, I need to take responsibility. All right, I called Jorge over here, and we had a bit of a powwow about this big, heavy piece of wood right here. It's resting right here, and it's resting on the other part that is resting on the trunk. So we've got the possibility of that slipping off and falling down. And at some point, this thing has got to come off of that so we can work on this. So which cut do you make first? You know, there's two schools of thought here. I thought about making an undercut down here and settling this down and finally getting all this weight off over here, and then possibly cutting that top piece off there. But then the weight's going to roll over that way, and that's kind of down the hill. Jorge thought it'd be better to start at the back end and start cutting and then get rid of the weight over there so that maybe this might roll off over in this direction. And if that's the case, this point right down here might be really important. So you got to look at every little obstacle up here, every little bit that might hang it up. And there is a lot of weight on here, but it is resting down on this pretty solidly. I guess worst case scenario is once I get all the weight off down to there. But that's a really tough spot to work too, because I'd be kind of in the zone of this thing rolling. And once I get it off of that, who knows what's going to happen. There may be enough weight up there that will cause it to roll over that way. If I read this correctly, there's enough weight down here that surpasses the weight on that side. So I believe that Jorge's probably right. So I think I'm going to start at that end. And once I get it clear of that, hopefully I can just keep chunking and chunking, and then ultimately take a big piece off of there, and this thing will roll away from me. But I'm kind of in the death zone no matter what I do. Alright, at this point I got out the GoPro and stuck it under my helmet, and I think I bumped it, so unfortunately this isn't the greatest footage, but if you're really interested in seeing how this new 500i works, gives you some good shots here. It's just a couple of minutes of me working with the saw. You'll get a better idea of how I handle the saw, but you can't really see the cuts in the beauties. So I apologize, but it's still worth watching. So just pretend you're out in the woods. Not a fun place to be. What a mess. The whole thing's resting on that. And I cut a bunch of it over there too.
What?
I cut a bunch on that side over there.
Oh yeah, I saw it. Right there. Wait, don't. Just keep cutting there, like this is.
Within reason. I did not want that to fall back towards me. So I go like this. Okay. Now what? All right, let her rip.
Really?
Yeah. Eric, heads up. Keep an eye on that tree.
Huh?
Oh, let's pull the chain out of the way. I just don't want the chain to get trapped by it. Okay. Almost there, it's coming. About 3 more strokes and you'll have it. It'd be nicer to push that other piece off. Yeah. Almost. Yeah! All right. That felt good. Damn it. Thought I had it. Geez, it's moving. Everything's moving. Small saw. If I trap the bar, I want it to be a small bar.
Yeah.
Here, why don't you grab my saw in case this thing flips up. Jeez. It just settled down. Maybe we need to cut a piece off of here so it goes a little further. It's free here, free there, and free over there. It's just kind of balanced up in the air. Oh, yeah. Woo! On the ground.